Again, back to this give back, but in your case in particular, I'm interested specifically because, there's that education background and part of that. And I think it's honorable that you're willing to carry that forward.
Yeah, it was really important to me. I mean, in the last couple of years of my mom's work, she was doing mentorship for teachers that were becoming principals. And so, coaching them on that transition and what that looked like. And that's not an easy step for people, one, to choose to do. And it's a lot of, additional responsibility. And so being able to give an opportunity to the area just to have a different space than your classroom or something like that to continue to grow and brainstorm and create exciting things for then again, our students and our future generations here, I think it's important.
Did your mother have or share any thoughts with you about just her opinions about the system here? And I'm curious to know, I know, from an outside perspective,
Sure.
I have but I'm curious, somebody on the inside, what was her perspective?
There had been a point in time where I was thinking about maybe I should have become a teacher, or maybe I'll go back and figure out how to get my credentials and still teach, but in a more hospitality driven way. Mm-hmm. And it had been a while since she had told me this, but she had said I wouldn't become a teacher today. She didn't, the way the system worked, and she wouldn't do it again.
Right.
She wouldn't choose to do it again. What she would have chosen differently, I'm not entirely sure. Mm-hmm. Just who she is by nature, I couldn't imagine her doing anything else.
Yeah. Did she indicate anything in particular as to why?
That teachers weren't given the ability to actually teach.
Yeah.
That it was too much rules and regulations, more or less.
By the way, I'm really sorry to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm missing both my parents too.
Yeah. She had a long fight with two diseases that didn't mix well together. And,
right.
And unfortunately she lost her fight, but she gave it her 110% and definitely went out on her own terms. I mean,
sounds like my mom. She fought it just because she was just so angry at being sick.
Yeah. And that was really, really it. I mean, she kind of officially retired and then fell ill, and she was pissed.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm going to get better and I'm going to go do this. And she did a lot of those things. Yeah. Right. But then she got tired of fighting, and she actively chose to go to the hospital. And
right.
You guys had a lovely trip together, didn't you, before?
Yeah, it was an interesting trip just because, she was kind of wheelchair bound due to severe pain in her back from the cancer that she had. And so we did make it to Hawaii, though. We made it to Hawaii in October of 2018, and we lost her in March of 2019. And so that was a great trip to be able to go on and have those
I hate
memories.
to say that it's good, but I understand. Yeah. I mean, the good times that were separated between a lot of difficulty for my mother were great.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fantastic that she did. My mom fought like crazy. She was battling cancer as well, breast cancer. Mm. And, and there was questions about whether was it worth for her, it was a 10-year fight. Was it worth all of that? Because there was a lot of hard quality of life issues, but there were, certain moments in there that I think.
Did you ever ask her that question?
No, good God, no. I don't want to know.
Interesting.
The answer to that.
I had a different experience with my mother's death, which just happened, it was 2 years ago actually, but she wasn't super healthy, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. She had a car accident. Here's my mother is all my life. She was the strongest, most driven, woman on the planet as far as I was concerned, and I looked up to her. And then there was a car accident. And from there on, it was sudden. It was just downhill. And not sudden in the sense that there was 10 years or 11 years that passed in between there, but consistently a downward slide. Mm-hmm. So she wasn't super healthy, but her death did come suddenly. So I sometimes I wonder, I mean, obviously we always wonder, like, what could I have done differently or whatever. Right. Like that's what everybody does. But we weren't on bad terms, but we weren't super close. Mm-hmm. And I think back, like, what would I have asked her? I just asked you, Phil, like, did you ask your mother that? I don't know if I have any questions, because I feel like, similar to what you mentioned earlier, like you had some tough times but you're here now and you're in a good place and you're doing good things. And like, so it's hard to be pissed at all the shit because you're like, this is where I'm at now. Right.
Right.
Similar to my mother. It's like, I could ask 1,000 questions, but the fact is it's not going to change anything. I don't have another mother to do it differently. Mm-hmm. You know, I can do it differently for my daughter.
Right. But that's a different experience. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. It's interesting because so my mother and her mother had a very, very different relationship than my mom and I did. And my mom and I were very close, and I'm very grateful for that, because knowing what her relationship was with her mother, I'm like, oh, no, thank you. And, you know, it's like generationally different. I mean, there's so many things.
Good for her for breaking the tapes too.
My mom also like made a very active decision to do it differently. And so, you know, throughout the last 10 years of, you know, going through a divorce and talking to my mom about that, and, you know, being like, yeah, my first ex-husband was a hell of a lot like my father, and like all of that kind of stuff, and her being really honest and candid about what that relationship was.
How does that happen, by the way? Like we marry our parents, right?
Oh, isn't there like it's not Freud who did that research project?
Somebody,
Anyway,
but,
sorry.
You know, so we were always really close, and she was always really honest and with me. And I think, you know, I got to ask her a lot of those questions, and I knew where we stood for really, you know, for most of my life. And, you know, there were the questions I wanted to ask her, you know, before she passed away, and I wanted to record them and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, her and I both put it off, I think, in the, you know, frontward, thinking like, oh, we'll get around to it, we still have time. But then in the back of our minds, also being like avoiding it because we don't want to accept what that reality is. Yeah. And we did have an opportunity to do it, actually in the last week of her being alive, like roughly, but I still didn't get to ask all of them. Yeah. And then, you know, you grapple with like, I should have done it sooner. And then, you know, you go down that hole. But then at the same time, it's kind of like, well, I guess it's meant for me to find within myself and know that I still know without having to ask her.
Yeah. Right. Find the answers for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Because she gave me the tools.
Did you tell me one time, I remember us sitting on the couch up there in the corner, and I was probably complaining about my daughter. You don't complain much. My daughter, who's 13, who's a bit of a challenge right now.
She's awesome.
She's awesome for everybody else. And didn't you tell me that you were a really tough kid for a while, and then you kind of turned things around?
Mean, I was like, in the grand scheme of things, I was a good kid.
Pain in the ass.
I was a total pain in the ass. Yeah. I was a teenage girl.
Right. I guess that's what I mean. Not that you were a tough kid, but like you did the whole, like stuff that I can't relate to.
I stopped talking to my mom at 12 and didn't talk to her again until I was like 17.
Wow.
Except for like the, hi, yeah, I'm alive, I'm good.
Yeah. Can I have money to go to the mall?
Can I, right. Like, can you pay my gas? You know, kind of a thing. And she would tell you that I was a total bitch. Like, just no problem telling anybody that. And I would agree with her.
So this gave me hope when she told me this story, because I was like, all right, my daughter's 13. So hopefully, because I would consider that we were close. And the reason I ask is because I have had just recently some opportunities presented to me in which I can tell some stories on a really large stage. And there's stories that I haven't spoken to my daughter about. And I think about like what you're talking about, or later in life, you were asking the questions, and they're questions that I know at some point in her human life, she's going to want to know answers to anyway. And I debate actively back and forth about how open to be with my daughter, who's, you know, she's only 13, and you want to preserve that childhood. But as I'm saying that, and she's on Snapchat, and there's gross people sending her so she's been exposed to way more than I was, even before I was 17, 18 years old, and not because she's chosen it. But I kind of I wonder if you had opportunities and I guess I asked myself the same question, like to ask these questions, or not to ask the questions, but to be presented with information about your mother's past or about her experiences at a younger age. Would that have been something you could handle between the ages of 12 and 17 when you were being what she said was a bitch, like my daughter?
Yeah.
By the way, I love my daughter so much as I'm saying that.
I think the short answer is yes. We'll just talk about my father as the example. My mom was pretty straightforward and honest with me about who my father was on a soft scale.
Right.
And it didn't take me long to learn it for myself. And it was like, she never, when I was younger, like she never outright was like, he sucks or, whatever. Right. She was a very diplomatic woman in that regard. And she did not need to be at all. Yeah. And I know why she did it. She wanted me to make my own choices and my own decisions on what that relationship was going to look like. And she wasn't going to like sway it either way. And, she always encouraged me to like go, every other weekend and blah, 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 until I was old enough to make those decisions, not to on my own.
I wasn't at the every other weekend guy too.
And I came to that realization on my own. I, slowly seeing things for myself and being like, oh yeah, that happened. And you kind of mentioned that. And then, so her sharing those things, like they just weren't ever really surprising, I guess. And she was also,
but she shared them after you kind of figured it out or before?
It was like a combination. Like,
so you guys kind of met there at the end.
Softly like, tell me
I saw
in the beginning being like, well, sometimes he's not going to be honest.
Yeah. Right.
Or like sometimes he doesn't show up.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so, and then you like come to him on your own and you talk to her and like we always got there. But in regards to her and my relationship and, I still remember her talking about how like, from 12 to 17, I didn't really talk to her. And then like, I very vividly remember the first time she tried to hold my hand and I stopped holding her hand. And then the first time that I went back to hold her hand. And that was like that 12 to 17 kind of things. Like it was like I was 12 in the mall. She tried to hold my hand and I was like, oh no, that is not what we're doing here. And then it was like, my senior year of high school and we were walking again in the mall and, I went to like go grab her hand and it was just kind of like this.
Did she start crying?
I don't know, but I feel like I could feel like the radiation like coming off of her.
Oh my gosh. You have such a surprising reveal ahead of you too.
Yeah.
Like for me, I didn't know what my parents really thought of me until I had a child. And then I got it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like
just
thought of
how deep and how
they loved you?
Yeah, and how far it goes.
Right.
Really?
Just quite how far it goes.
Is that because now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I see it because this is how I feel? Or did they actively show you something that you hadn't seen?
And having a child, like what I would do for this child.
Right.
Yeah,
but not everybody feels that way.
That's true.
Unfortunately, there are parents out there who,
it doesn't click like that, right?
Right. I'm estranged from my father as of about 3 years ago, but
you already get it. Just in your talking about your relationship with your mother, when you do have a child, you're just going to be like, oh my gosh.
It's going to be mush.
Yeah.
It's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
There's all the other
not going to be your dad.
The devil's kind of in the details. Good luck.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I have some moments like that with her every now and then now, even, and it's not as active as her like deciding to hold my hand or something, God forbid. But with her, she'll come up and
God, she looks up to you so much. You don't even see it.
I don't. I really don't see that. And honestly, I try to because people tell me that. They're like, oh, she's amazing. And I just feel like she's got so much frustration toward me. And I've been doing a lot of work around that, actively trying to at least take ownership of what I can do. I can't control her hormones and I can't, she's not going to hold my hand anytime soon. But, every now and then we have a moment and it's really like, it'll be something stupid. Like she'll be like here and she'll want to take a selfie with me, which that alone is like, I'm like your mother was when you grabbed her hand. Like,
I wish you could see the look on your face right now.
Like, I was like, oh, really? Yeah. I look like an ass.